Hazel says hi. She wished she could have made it. Oh, you're muted, Matt.
This is my first time using Zoom. I'm so sorry.
Uh,
So I've put a link to the meeting doc in the chat. Please feel free to sign in with your attendance. As always, this is a CNCF sponsored event, so the code of conduct does apply. Please don't do or say anything that would be in violation of that code in 5 years. I don't believe it's ever been an issue, but we always say it anyway. So what we're going to be doing today are two things in our meeting. One, we're going to have a follow-on from last week, 2 weeks ago, when Charity Majors from honeycomb.io, a thought leader in the observability space who's done a lot of writing on this topic and many other topics. Her blog is awesome. It's charity.wtf. Check it out if you haven't. It will make you think and chuckle. She gave a talk where she introduced some of the concepts around the notion of Observability 2.0. We're not going to redo the whole talk, obviously, but I did think it would make sense to have a discussion on some of the practical applications of it and what does it mean for us. So that's the first thing we'll be doing. And then secondly, over the last several months and really years, but months more acutely, the CNCF's Technical Oversight Committee, or TOC, has made a proposal and introduced a new working model for tags, working groups, and is introducing some new concepts. A teaser would be initiatives and community groups. The way to think about this, I think, is that the CNCF and its ecosystem is a coalition of the willing. And just like any organization, there is growth. And when you're in a small startup in someone's garage, or with a score of people or less, eventually an ailment of your success is that you now have to figure out how you work with more people and more minds that want to contribute, and how do you not find yourself crushed under the weight of just communication, and so I see this as that. It's a good problem to have. We have a lot more people that want to contribute, and we'll get into it with the slides from a few weeks ago that were presented at the TOC after we talk about Observability 2.0. Welcome, Alolita. I've just opened the meeting.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Charity. Welcome. Very good to see you. Thank you for joining.
So we're about to just start with Charity and then get into the tag reboot stuff in the second half of the meeting. Alolita, I don't want to put you on the spot, but did you come with anything that you want to talk about specifically? I have a couple ideas to get us started, but
no, I think today we wanted to focus in on Charity's talk, as well as kind of discussion around Observability 2.0 and some of her thoughts there. And then, of course, as you called out, the discussions that are ongoing from the TOC with some amount of tag restructuring that is being discussed, but also this will kind of dovetail into what's coming up at KubeCon in a few weeks, and I think there's some discussions that are going to be held there. So all good. That's what I was
cool.
interested in.
Okay, great. So thanks for the additional folks that have joined. Okay, so maybe we could start by saying, as I've read and rewatched the video from last week and some of the other ones where you've presented similar content at a variety of conferences, I think Observability 2.0 is as much, if not more, about a mindset and a mind, I don't want to say a paradigm shift because it's too buzzwordy, but it's definitely a new way of thinking about telemetry and how we understand the systems we built. So I thought we might start with sort of like what's it mean to me? Like, say I'm working in a company as an engineer, or perhaps even on an SRE or an observability team or something like that. I can't change my organization overnight. I probably have an existing bunch of vendors. They're all great, right? What can I do in terms of how I go about my work? That even if I don't say have a tool that has the feature Observability 2.0, which is not a thing, what does that mean for me practically in my daily job? So I know you have some thoughts there that I've heard in some talks, but not in 2 weeks ago. So maybe that might be a great place to start.
Yeah, I think so much of this is about learning to treat our telemetry less like ops people of yore and more like data teams, more like analytics teams, right? And so like if you've got unstructured logs, structure them, right? If you've got metrics, take a hard, like metrics are should be used for summaries of vast quantities of data, not for trying to understand complex systems. The future like points in the direction of logs, right? Logs are the bridge between Ollie 1.0 and 2.0 or Ollie 3.0, as Hazel likes to talk about, which is more like data lakes, with AI helping like engineering adjacent teams access that stuff. So fewer logs, wider logs, structured logs, right? The wider the data, the more context you're packing into each line. And the more context you have, like data is made powerful through context. So the more context you have, the more ability to have high cardinality data in there, the more you get into 2.0 land. So like those are things every engineer can start doing today, right? And starting to learn the sort of the toolkit that we've had in the past has been all about managing the trade-off between cost and cardinality, cost and cardinality. It's like the original sin of Observability 1.0 is that the two things you most lean on to manage cost are the two most important parts of your telemetry, detail and context. To manage cost, you delete detail and you delete context, which is another way of saying, and I wish I had thought of this like 8 years ago. Instead of saying cardinality and dimensionality, I could have just said detail and context. I think people would have been a lot less confused. But like those are like the essential trade-offs in a 1.0 world, detail and context, which means it's zero sum. You pay more, you get better observability. Well,
Yeah,
that
this
sucks.
is a common experience, right?
Everybody has,
Everyone,
everybody's, half of the world has written, if not gone to a talk or read or a blog post that says how to have less cardinality in your systems, right?
right? And in my experience, oftentimes and I've heard this is common as well, once you're in this spot, that's actually why you look to metrics because they're still there and are largely untouched. And then you have grand meetings where humans try to do inference and say, well,
Yeah.
this and this and this and that, and my ruler held up to the screen means this. Let's go validate
Yeah.
that. And you can spend a huge amount of time just doing root cause analysis and
And all of that inference is being done here. It's not in your tools, which means it is not accessible to most engineers. And this is not even unique to engineering. Like anyone who works in complex systems of any site said the experience where there's a couple debuggers of last resort. They're the people who have been there the longest, right? Because there's so much context that is in here. It's not in your tool. So it's not accessible to newer people or people who have been there less times or experience fewer outages. And that sucks.
indeed. Um, so many people are also getting new features from their existing vendors or are growing expertise in-house in the form of Delta Ninja Strike squads to go, chase fires or work on targeted problems. But we have new signals coming in. Obviously, profiling, there's been a ton of work around there. And that too is a new dimension or a new slice or a view of our systems. I would argue that there are going to be increasing data sources coming along, and maybe we could talk about that as well. But
Yeah, but they're all going to be variations on
how do you
structured
think
data.
about profiling? Not just in terms of what it can offer, and in this context of more holistic
Honestly,
of
my
understanding.
take on profiling, I'm pretty excited about the CNCF profiling project, and we plan to hitch our wagon to that. But my take on profiling is that most people, what they actually want is good tracing, but they don't have good tracing, so they reach for profiling. Profiling is a power tool that really people who only a very small slice of people should need to reach for. But if they don't have access to good tracing or they can't get what they want out of the tracing tool, they reach for this tool that's honestly giving them like, and I get this, like I used to reach for strace to debug my code too, right? But
Mm,
like, it's not really the level of abstraction where you have to go deep into not just the forest, but like the wandering woods, right? To try and make sense of it. It's not accessible to most people. What most people need is good tracing, but good tracing that is connected to the rest of, like no dead ends, right? Like you need to be able to slice and dice and find something and then view it as a trace and then zoom out and see, tracing that's integrated into like a single source of truth. But most people don't have good tracing. The tracing tool of V1, there's no knock against them, but like, V1s are often famously rocky. Like, I think they're notorious places who have rolled out to your I'm not going to name them because I don't want to be shitting on technology, but like the years on, sometimes a decade on, they have this experience where to this day they spent possibly 6 months reinstrumenting their entire stack to have tracing, and there's a priesthood of like one or two people who know how to use it. And if people want traces, they go to those people. They don't go to the tool because it's so often a silo, detached, hard to use, hard to understand. It is kind of depressing that reaching for profiling is easier for most engineers than reaching for tracing.
Well, I think,
And it's
yeah,
not the way it should be.
this was certainly exacerbated prior to OpenTelemetry. You know, if you wanted to do distributed tracing, with many technology leaders who have kind of had many scars and stripes, you know, coming up through their careers are now, you know,
Yeah,
by
they're all
thought leaders
becoming
and
the
in charge,
the
and they've all been
VP.
burned by this horribly in the past because it was a DIY kind
Yeah.
of crafting exercise to do it at all, and to
Yeah.
do it ubiquitously or at the kind of scale where it starts to add real value in a microservices distributed environment. That meant alignment across all teams. So
Yeah, it
I
was a
think,
heavy, heavy lift. A lot of people got burned by the rollout of Tracing 1.0, and I think we're still grappling with that to this day.
I
Yeah,
think so
yeah.
too.
I think, and I think that, Charity, to your point, the infrastructure, and instrumentation across, uniformly across, microservices or applications in general, which are distributed, uh, has never really, caught up, if you will,
Yeah.
with the initial assumptions of tracing,
Yeah.
right? So
Ooh, great point.
it really is that gap led to that experience, which was very very flaky for many folks.
Yeah, there's
So
no reason that it has to be that hard to instrument, you know? And there's no reason that tracing has to be so much harder to instrument than, all these other things. It's purely, like you say, we're behind. I do think I think profiling data is useful, and my hope is that eventually we'll be able to use profiling data to decorate traces in a kind of like, oh, I'm interested, and this is where I think telemetry pipelines have so much promise for the future. I think we're just starting to see I think when it comes to cost control, when it comes to instrumentation, when it comes to governance of types of telemetry, when it comes to a lot of these things, my thinking is in this area has really just evolved over the past week as I've been trying to write some stuff around cost containment, and I'm realizing that like the costs have been a forcing function for us to address, I think, a lot of sort of long dormant, long underinvested in usability, maintainability, governability things. And so I'm actually I'm pretty bullish on some of that stuff. And like using profiling data to decorate traces when I'm like, I need this now, so turn the tap on for a bit, right? Then attach it to my trace so that I can still interact with it like a trace, but I have all this extra data that I can search. It's super interesting.
yeah, this actually, we talked at length about this with Ted Young back in the tail end of December about dynamically changing, head or tail sampling rules.
Mm-hmm.
Or there's all kinds of ways to have predicates around what traces do we keep and what do we not, and systems that can do that adaptively and dynamically. I think absolutely are the future. To that end, there's an the op-amp, a protocol to dynamically do these sorts of configuration changes is one huge advance.
Yeah.
I'll post a link to it a little later. But another kind of
Talk about things where people were scarred by the first generation. Sampling is another one.
mhm.
People think sampling and they're like, oh God, blindly drop half of my data. That's gonna break all my trade. Like when
That,
like
or here's this knob that can cost an amazing amount of money very quickly,
yeah, modern
combined with,
sampling,
how did it get even set, right? And where?
modern sampling is like not your grandma's
So
sampling. Like
there are
we can make
cautionary
decisions
tales.
about what to keep after the request is finished, right? We can keep all errors, all long-running queries, we can do these really, and the state of the art is evolving fast.
Yeah, I think there's also a convergence across domains. You had mentioned costs, right? And we always think about costs in terms of like, what's my bill? But there are these other costs that can even be
Oh,
even bigger. For example, the cost of compliance. Say that you've got to deal with PCI DSS or FedRAMP
yep.
or HIPAA or any of these kind of like policy frameworks or reporting frameworks, either for the street, the SEC, or for compliance. Observability tooling has a lot of that raw information. Deployment strategies that are observable can help auto-generate that documentation. So there's like your systems, and as we hold them, can cost the organization if they don't
You know,
provide
it's
these as artifacts, or they could be a huge the complete opposite, where a huge amount of cost that's not cloud costs, but the way we operate our clouds impacts those costs.
and I thought what you were going to say was cognitive costs, which are also
Well, that too, sure.
elusive and hidden. They're like the dark matter of software engineering. No one can see them, but they're adding up everywhere. No, I think that's a really good point. And I think it's no accident that historically security costs have been kind of segregated from operational costs because, it's ironic in a way that costs are soaring for observability at a time when storage costs are like plummeting. And what that tells you is like it's not about storing the data, it's about using the data. That's what's expensive.
Okay, this is a great segue then. If you'll humor me, I have a small analogy from my personal life that I think will make sense very shortly. That leads us to sort of like what can we actually do as open source and practitioners, engineers, product designers, and all of that. I had the opportunity when I had a research job long ago to live in Germany, and way back then I saw this cool system that was put in place with a little nudge by giving sort of the grassroots lower parts, most of the users in this system, the ability to change the whole system in a gradual but rapid way. They wanted to reduce the cost of recycling. So when you go to Germany to Bauhaus, which is like Home Depot or Lowe's or a big box retail store, they passed a simple law that said the retailer has to deal with all of the packaging for products. And there's typically a bunch of benches in the back, and whenever you buy something, you can unwrap it and get just the thing you bought and then walk out of the store with that. And all of the packaging has to be handled by the retailer. So what happens systemically, right? Retailers say, I want to buy products that have less packaging because I have to pay for the cost of all this packaging. So given the same product, if two different suppliers have it, I'm going to take the one with less packaging because then I don't have to deal with it. So then people that make things that are sold in stores start saying, oh, I want to be more competitive and get my products placed. I will make my products have less packaging, right? And so the whole supply chain upstream can be changed, by a consensus and a coalition of the willing. So sort of in that context, again, getting back to like, so I just work here, right? What can I do in terms of like, what should we demand from our vendors? What should we demand from our platform teams that we haven't in the past? And not to throw anyone under any buses, the entire domain, finally, has been furiously in a sometimes frenetic frenzy and oftentimes in a very thoughtful way, really implemented these core capabilities to collect these signals, aggregate them, understand them, visualize them. So up until now, we haven't had, everybody's like, stop it, we're trying to make tracing work at all. We're trying to make profiling work at all. Now that we can actually have all of these things, it's still very a la carte, right? So what
So
should we
in your
demand?
metaphor, in your story, is the retailer doing the packaging? Is that end users or is that CNC or is that um is that CNCF? Is that
Oh, I suppose it's not a direct analogy. It's more just a case of like how, instead of saying we're going to have all these recycling projects and all of the end users are going to have to just deal with the recycling and we'll figure out ways as a society to collect all of this waste, right? Those users in this case that want to go to a store to buy something might be your engineers. Your product teams might be the actual retailers, the people that have
But
decisions around.
I think Matt Charity raises
Yeah,
a good
so like
a good question there, right? Because who is the facilitator in that whole process, right? If you were to actually influence the supply chain, if you will, in the in the case of tracing or in the case of,
sure, yeah,
the
that's a
metrics
good focusing.
pipelines that are being instrumented at rapid scales,
So
you
the
know.
I do
users
feel
of
like
observability tooling, are the people that oftentimes are the ones that say, "Hey, we need these tools," or "Hey,
yeah.
platform team, I really want these features so that
I
I don't
feel like
do them
we've been
myself."
spending
Right,
years trying to tell people have expect more from your vendors.
right. Like
Like
I've heard you go off on
expect
this
more
before, so it's a bit of a setup. But like, what should we be asking for now that we
high
can ask for the world?
cardinality context. I think fewer bells and whistles and fewer me too features and more like the cost crisis in observability, as far as I can tell, is driven by four things. Only one of them is good. One of them is the fact that the organizations increasingly depend on this and know they depend on this. This was not always true in the past. It was the ops domain, right? So like Gartner did this presentation on costs. So I now have data in my brain, whereas before I've had a lot of vibes and a lot of experiences. And now they've been saying, they're like, what organizations have been spending on observability has risen 40% per year, year over year for the past 5 years, since 2019. That is insane,
Yeah.
right? Have we gotten that much more value? No, right? So, and they have quotes there where they're like, it's spread like wildfire, or we can't take it out of people's hands. And I'm like, that out of all the things on the list, that is a good thing. It might not feel that way, but we have been flying blind, and I guarantee you, we've been paying those costs elsewhere in the organization, and it has been more costly. So like front-loading observability has the potential to make you might be paying a little more, but downstream it makes everything better, especially as complexity continues to store. The other things that have been driving cost have been all of these big vendors are Ollie 1.0, right? So tool proliferation. If you're like Gartner said that most of their customers are using 10 to 20 observability tools. That means every request that enters their system, they pay for 10 to 20 times baseline. If there's one request per, that's 20x. That is like this, right? And not only that, but some of those we know are much more than one per tool, right? It's logs, you've got log spew, you've got traces, you've got hundreds of metrics per, so like, no, you start to see how this cost curve takes shape, right?
In many
Number two,
organizations too, you also have team by team tool differences. So it's not even
yeah,
organization-wide cost.
exactly. There's a way that consolidation is right now. I seeing consolidation being used as a blunt tool, and understandably so. But I think there are ways that consolidation can really serve everyone. But like number one on the bad list is just tool proliferation, lack of discipline, And so number two is anything metrics based. It's that cost. It's that give get over cardinality. More cardinality is cardinality and dimensionality, right? More cost, more context, bills go up. It is those three things, plus the very good thing that people are now learning to rely on these things. And like that's it. And so many of these things would be like if they add more tools and more data sources and more, that's only going to serve the vendors, because for the more people's attention fragments, the weaker this whole house of cards gets, right? Because you've got the poor engineer in here, like you said, pulling out the ruler and going, well, does that curve look like that curve? So the only way I think to bend this cost curve back down is to unify on a single source of truth. And that single source of truth can't be metrics. Metrics can't handle context and dimensions, right? It has to be wide structured data. And then we can get into the more interesting conversations of vendor agnostic, tool agnostic things that will help us bend this cost curve down. And that's where I'm putting so much trust and faith in telemetry pipelines, because it's a reality that there are some of your
Could you
services.
define that for folks that might not be
Telemetry
familiar or might be
pipelines are
dialing in?
like think like Envoy as was a routing thing, routing mesh, service mesh, like that, but for telemetry. So you're governing at a higher level. You're like, these streams go there, these streams go there. You're applying policies to types of things. So not everything needs the same level of observability, right? You've got external facing, customer sensitive services that need all the, if your business model, like if you're doing e-commerce and a 200 milliseconds, 200 seconds, right? Will kill your user experience. You need all the Ollie you can get, right? If you're a bank, if you're a delivery company, you're external facing, like very deep business, all you can get for those services. But then, and Gartner attached some numbers to these that I don't quite believe. They said 5% need all of that. There's 35% in the middle tier and 65% in the bottom tier. This is probably an artifact of the types of enterprises they're talking to. But it's for sure a fact that there are also internal services that are not sensitive to this stuff, that just need, maybe they need metrics, summary statistics. Maybe they just need, they need wide, rich log. I continue to think for most folks, wide, rich log events, but sampled is the most cost-effective but utilitarian solution you can get. And then there's a bottom tier of stuff that it's dev tools. You need to know if it's up or it's down, right? When it's broken, you go kick the box, right? And telemetry pipelines can help you say, oh, we need to graduate this one, right? It's going live. Oh, we need more from this one, without having to know and understand every single service in minute detail. It can also like add AI, to do some more probabilistic, non-deterministic identifying of outliers. But like, and historically, the choices have been very binary. Either you make all of your aggregation and decisions at right time. That's metrics, right? You're like, I'm deciding what data I'm going to discard, what data I'm going to keep. I'm locking you into being able to ask these questions forever, right? On the other extreme, the Ollie 2.0 world has swung kind of over there. It's like, okay, keep everything about everything. Like everyone can see that's not sustainable, right? But there's this middle ground where you need to keep everything about some things about some things, a little about some things, right? And telemetry pipelines, I think, are emerging as the power tool we have to very dynamically shift governance up and down this continuum from write time to read time and back.
Yeah, I think that there are also some things that have happened in OpenTelemetry that I've just seen in the last month or so blogged about that can help facilitate that kind of a approach to not everything needs the same treatment. I was just looking for it, and I'll find it if I don't have to speak for a few, so I can even follow it up. But basically, the service discovery mechanism that Kubernetes uses with labels, has been, the OpenTelemetry Collector team, Alolita, you might have more specifics shooting from the hip on names, but they were just writing about how they've adopted the same design ethos. So now instead of a centralized observability team having to respin collectors every single time a team wants to make a configuration change, which can be an example of those like workflows that aren't always obvious that organizationally cost massively, but by having this underwater team that has to change the wheels on the bus while it's driving all of the time, but can sort of democratize from a configuration perspective, pods and deployments being annotated with labels by the teams that own them, so that those things aren't separate. I'll try to find up a link, but what things like this might we suggest to teams that are out there actually using what they have today? That's an example of a workflow that I've also found useful whenever possible. Give people the ability to manage their own workloads in production, and then don't try to do everything for them if you can help it.
I mean, that's the only model that really, reduces the cognitive load, if you will, of observability, right? A distributed model. Because does centralization really work? Not really. Because, again, at the end of the day, everybody who's using these telemetry pipelines is a stakeholder in that whole process.
Found them. I'll put them in the doc. Cool. Does anyone else have any things that they want to talk about while we still have time? I don't want to be the only one with questions.
I think I have a question regarding, the different telemetry data types that have been segmented and further segmented as part of, many conversations. And that, I think, Charity, you brought up a very good point about profiling, being really the annotator, if you will, for more detailed, understanding of traces. And that's absolutely, right on. But what about, again, if you were to look at unified observability end to end, and you are, no longer looking only at the at scale on the server side or within the cloud, if you will, but also within, the edge. And and that's where, the whole discussion about events, which are kind of, today stuffed into logs, comes in, right? Is that what is your perspective in terms of that journey and evolution that is ongoing in that stack? Because that problem is not solved yet in terms of the edge and the cloud, if you will, in today's terminology, and then going into the future where in the AI world, that actually becomes not as distinctive as those boundaries lie today. Like, how do you see telemetry data playing, converging or diverging in that world?
You said a lot of interesting things, and I'm struggling to pluck the question out of there. How the difference between the cloud and the edge, how is that changing?
That is from a telemetry data perspective, right? Because again, obviously, if you were to look at tracing, which has been a very, which has continued to grow in popularity, but mostly within the cloud itself, right? It's not really very pervasive
Mhm.
in the or even feasible, if you will, in the universe of the edge. Um,
I think you could say the same thing about web and about mobile and
yeah.
about IoT. And I think that there's a lot of value to be gleaned from knitting these in a single trace, right? Knitting these, having this telemetry. A lot of it is the type of engineers you recruit, the type of engineers who are successful, the kinds of the lack of I've been saying for years that like the thing that creates silos is when everyone has their own tool and they all look at their own view of reality, you know, and they're not actually sharing a view of reality. And, you know, I've seen so many web teams and mobile teams, you know, just get kind of like shunted off into a corner. And I think that's kind of inevitable when they have all their own tooling and it's not, you know, part of the standard stack. So I think there's a lot of value to be found there. I don't feel like I yet see a groundswell for that to happen. I think it's very much the top 3% of teams, you know, are investing into this because it's not where the center of gravity is from a tooling perspective or from a vendor perspective at all. So I don't know. I don't know, honestly.
But is it because of just that layer is being tackled by a different community, of engineers,
I think
and
that's a
hence
lot of
it
it.
doesn't converge?
I
Because it
think a
doesn't
lot of
really solve the user's problem, right? At
I
the end
think
of the
that's
day.
I think that's a lot of it. I do think that like fucking Apple, man, just like kneecapped the whole mobile development community with its whole like release process. Like they're making it virtually impossible to practice all good software engineering best practices when it comes to like deployments and you know continuous deployment and shipping small changes. It's just like you could not have designed a more elegant solution to like just like cripple a generation of engineers. And I feel like there's
You mean
only
the
so much
cost
we
of
can work
updating the
around that.
version of an application in the App
Right, it's the
Store,
whole
or the
stack.
Android store, or
Yeah.
any of the, so just this move to sort of slow everything down and have not what we've come
Big
to.
bang releases. It's like they're in the 1990s, you know? So I think it's a lot of things. I do think that like one of the only levers that might be powerful enough to bend this is the cost crisis.
So I think a burgeoning cost crisis that is sort of begs the question, what's the edge? Is, with the advent of robotics and
Mhm.
robots of various kinds, not just cars, but all the other kind of bots, those are all complex systems in and of themselves with their own telemetry and all of that. And, you know, there's going to be a lot a lot of streams of telemetry and signals coming from not only, what we've created, but what it goes on to do autonomously in some cases that
The one thing
there
about
will be
those
just
though,
a need to handle all of this. So there's huge opportunity there for the open source telemetry community.
uh Matt, I always forget his last name. The guy who he worked at Lyft for a long time. He's now a co-founder of a mobile startup. He wrote some really spicy blog posts last year, basically just being like, all observability vendors are venal and corrupt, and the reason they're telling you to send you all their data is because they want your money. And what if by default nobody sent any telemetry and blah 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 blah. And I'm like, I think this is really interesting for mobile devices and IoT because there's no resource contention, right? And debugging mostly happens whenever the engineer decides to go pull that telemetry. But like, I don't see that working in a world where one of the biggest eternal problems is always what's happening right now on
Right now.
these
Yeah.
shared resources with lots of contention. You
Mhm.
shit, you know, and I think we can get better at choosing where we aggregate and where we sample and where we do these things. But like, I don't actually, I do think that there are some things we can do to save costs that involve treating distant satellites as satellites and pull, you know, one of the other
Mhm.
things that telemetry pipelines can do that I didn't mention is store raw events in a very cheap place like S3 and then rehydrate them into the UI upon request, which is I
Yeah.
think one of those really, really powerful sort of middle grounds. Yeah, pay to store all the data, drop it into this compliance bucket, like Glacier, that's expensive to retrieve from, drop it in S3, and
Yeah,
then
just hierarchical
hybrid
storage.
thing where your engineers can go, I think we oversampled here and there's a problem there. Pull all that data back into the tool for us so that we can interact with it like normal.
Yeah, I think the dropping price of storage over the last several years to have
We've got to leverage that.
Yeah,
it's
exactly, exactly. And it's really
oh, what? No, that's
leveraging,
free, great. Time space
yeah,
trade-offs. Let's go. Right.
some of the newer implementations and cost solutions, which are more cost effective. I mean, use what works for you in one sense at this point in time.
I mean, like fashion, there's a lot of things that are cyclical, it would seem, I mean, whether it's the move from push-pull, just at the protocol level to some of these other trends we're talking about now, where space used to be the most expensive, storage used to be one of the most expensive things of all, right? So we have all of this thought optimization for how do we make do with no storage. And
now the GPUs are the most expensive of all.
right. Oh man, we only have 20 minutes left tops, so we probably shouldn't get into the GPU side unless we want to. I mean, we can do whatever we like.
That's a follow-up conversation, Matt.
Okay. Well, this has been cool. Is there anything else we want to cover in the last couple of minutes?
Any
Sorry,
questions, David?
one question. Matt?
Yeah,
Yes.
go ahead.
I'm very curious, Sherry, to know some things about observability 2.0. So Matt talked a little about practicality, which is what I want to know because I'm a developer. I would like to know if there are any GitHub repos that would implement this. So for example, we use OpenTelemetry just to collect logs and then use some storage to only store logs and don't use any other storage solutions. Do you have examples? Do you have like things that we can practically do to implement Observability 2.0?
I'm going to drop this link. The best piece of writing on instrumentation the Ali 2.0 way is this one by Jeremy Morrell.
Awesome.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, part of the OTel thing is to be very, agnostic. And one of the things that is not well understood, I think, by the community at large is there's this perception that OTel is all about the three pillars, that those pillars are baked metric. When in fact, under the hood, everything in OTel is an event. And the only reason it shows up as metrics and logs and traces is because vendors keep building tools that choose to interpret them that way, right? And so I would love for there to be some more helpers or magic, to just like help people bootstrap. Something we're looking at a lot is like, how do we help people, if they're using Claude or Cursor, auto instrument this code for traces, right? Just give me the framework, right? Use tracing, right? Use OpenTelemetry tracing.
Yeah, more getting started for example, on OpenTelemetry docs on this new way. You could do this instead of.
I have an additional resource we could point you at. Just on February 21st, just a few weeks ago, the OpenTelemetry team released their demo, the OTel demo 2.0,
Awesome.
and they've made a bunch of enhancements to it. And there's a lot of good examples of if you had mentioned that you're using logs, but not other stuff. There's like a clonable, it runs locally, and you can kind of see all of these moving pieces in action. What are the Legos and how do they work? If you're asking a more technology-based question.
No, yeah, that's basically, awesome. I'll check that out, Matt. And also just one question. So to make the analogy to Observability 1.0, instead of Prometheus, Grafana Tempo, Grafana Loki, there would be some other solution to store all this high cardinality data, or would we still use this storage?
I want to just briefly interrupt that. We don't generally like to talk about specific vendors. We're more talking conceptually here because all of the vendors comprise the open source ecosystems that do this. So I want to be very careful not to talk about specific vendors, but more about
the industry is converging on columnar stores. Columnar stores are the Observability 2.0 storage engine because every single dimension is an index. So you don't have to be like, okay, we're going to choose indexes for these few very important ones and everything else is going to be unindexed and unsearchable, right? It stores a variety of data types. Like this is something that wasn't true a few years ago. And now there are open source options. There are commercially available options. There are options. And I think it's becoming very clear to everyone that it's got to be backed with a columnar store.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you. I didn't know the high cardinality because on some storage.
Yeah, a lot of people are like, it sounds like you're promising us magic. This is all impossible. And I'm like, it's impossible if you're using the wrong storage engines. A lot of problems in data are like this, right? If you've got the wrong data model or the wrong store, then like shit is just like impossibly hard. And if you've got the right one, it just, if you're like, oh my God, it could be this easy.
Thank you.
I
Awesome.
have another link for you. You're going to love this one. It's one of my favorites.
Awesome.
We had a guy working for us briefly, and he wrote this elegant essay that's really just kind of about databases, and it's beautiful. Like I send this to a lot of
Awesome.
people.
Thank you.
Lovely.
Oh, yes, this is good. I've got this one. I've got a couple as well. I'll augment with the OpenTelemetry kind of stuff. We've been talking about high cardinality in terms of like storage and database engines that need it, columnar storage, but there's also a huge cost to the teams that have to run those pipelines and actually, move all of this data around. So just again, part of our mission here in the tag is to raise awareness about what's going on in open source. Other recent developments, like recent the last year plus really, but coming to a head in terms of something workable now. A lot of work came out of F5 for this. I have to give some credit there, and other places as well. But how we handle telemetry as it's being shuttled around, just in the OTLP transport protocol itself, is another place where high cardinality has been extremely problematic. So I don't think we have time to deep dive into this stuff, but if you're a nerd for that kind of thing, there's some fascinating work using Apache Arrow to help with some.
Yeah, which is
protocol,
really, actually, I would say, and great enhancement that has been added to OpenTelemetry for continuing to
Yeah.
optimize the protocol.
In particular, because these cardinality problems, and they're not fixed in time. Organizations are dynamic. There's new things happening all the time. Some of the biggest cardinality bombs I've ever seen in production didn't come from engineering teams. They came from business and product and analyst teams that were like, wow, you know what's going on with the code that our data science team is writing? We're going to start tagging this with all kinds of stuff, including phone numbers, is the tongue-in-cheek joke. But these, as organizations grow, you can't do a cardinality assessment once and then wait for something to either fall over or cost.
Oh yeah, there's this like running joke about in the three pillars world about you go to bed on Friday night and your bill is $200K a month, and you wake up Monday morning and your bill is $2 million a month, and you rolled out no changes over the weekend. It was just like a change in user patterns or something.
Yeah, or
Yes.
say an S3 bucket with 5 billion little tiny files in it that somebody said, hey, we should move this to Glacier. That's an API call per object, folks. Right. So it can even be simple things, but the dynamically adaptive way that Arrow is being used, Arrow does dictionary encoding and all kinds of other optimizations to reduce the amount of bits that are required to represent these high cardinality sets, but those dictionaries change over time. So in a nutshell, a lot of the work on the Arrow integration with OpenTelemetry is around using some of the core capabilities of the Apache Arrow data format and associated ecosystem of libraries to dynamically send delta dictionaries and things like that. So when you do have cardinality distributions of labels, changing dynamically and coming and going, you don't have to do a reset with another static, assessment of what does that dimensionality look like. So I've been riveted by it for the last couple of months, as Laurent and others have been writing about it, but highly recommended. So maybe we won't be covering the TOC's changes for the tag reboots, which is fine. We talked about it more at the TOC meeting just last hour. This meeting always immediately follows the TOC meeting. So
we can also have more discussion, Matt, in a subsequent meeting this week, this month before.
For anyone who wants a preview, I've dropped a link to the deck from the TOC that actually is quite explanatory. I think it's all a great thing. So start thinking about things that you'd like to do. We have a lot of them defined already.
Yes.
But
I think, again, it's good to add, probably create an issue on our tag repo for folks to be able to comment on that on the TOC. doc, because it's not so easy to comment on slides, but definitely more detailed discussions can be had.
Yes. So I think we're at time.
Yes.
If folks want to kick around and talk some more. I've got a few minutes before the recording kicks us off at the end of the hour, but this has been a great, thank you, Charity, for joining us for
Yes,
cool conversation.
absolutely. Charity, are you at KubeCon this in a few weeks?
No, but Christine will be.
Ah,
Christine
wonderful. Yes,
keynoting that
she's
day.
I think she's keynoting, which will be very exciting.
Yeah, it'll be great.
Wonderful.
Cool.
We look
Thanks.
forward to seeing you. Thank you
Thanks so
again
much for having
joining
me
us.
again. This was a really fun discussion.
It was indeed, and
Yes.
and we'll definitely see you around. Thank you
All right.
again.
Have a great
Take
week,
care.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Matt.